Returning now to our top stories, the ceasefire in Gaza and ongoing war in Ukraine. And joining me to break it all down is Karin von Hippel, Distinguished Fellow at the Royal United Services Institute. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
I want to start in the Middle East. A standing ovation for Donald Trump in the Israeli parliament, a hostage exchange, a ceasefire. Is President Trump proving himself to be the ultimate peacemaker he's been claiming to be?
Well, in this particular case, yes. I think, there's hope now that that he might be able to apply more pressure onto Ukraine. And I know they had a conversation with Zelensky today. Uh, so, uh, you know, the real issue with him is his staying power. Will he be able to stay focused, make sure his team stays focused, make sure all the hard work that's yet to come in Gaza can happen? And that really will only happen with sustained effort. We're just at the very beginning of a really long, definitely a very difficult process with so many challenges along the way.
And I want to talk about Ukraine in just a moment. Speaking of this specific ceasefire, do you expect it to hold? You mentioned there a long road ahead. I guess the question is as well, given the living hostages have now been released by Hamas, what is the incentive of Israel to keep the peace?
Well, there's a lot of pressure on Israel by President Trump, as we know. And then, of course, there will be pressure on Hamas as well, because not everyone is sure that Hamas will abide by the agreement as well. And they have Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey putting pressure on them. I think, though, that the joy that we saw in both populations, both in Israel and in the Palestinian territories, not just in Gaza, would be so overwhelming that a leader would be very unpopular if they went back to war, at least in the near future. They'd have to have a very good reason to do so. And I think Donald Trump would see his reputation tarnished if that happens. So I think at least for the next few months, I think it will chug along. It depends on, so many factors, but I think it will go ahead. But then, this is going to take years, as we know. There's so many other challenges, not just disarmament, about rebuilding, where the money's going to come from, what is the technocratic government going to look like, what will the roles be for these internationals, for Donald Trump, for Tony Blair, and others who will sit on this, or chair, in the case of Donald Trump, on this board. So there's so many issues they still need to work out, but we're in a very good place. We haven't been in a place like this in a long time. So, he's able to brag, and I think we'll all give him the credit for it this time.
Looking at Ukraine then, President Trump today saying, quote, "We have to get Russia done." What does this Middle East deal mean for Kyiv?
I think it just gives them hope that Trump can put additional pressure on Russia. Of course, he doesn't have the same sort of relationship with Putin that he does with Netanyahu. And I think Netanyahu also saw himself cornered. Russia's been cornered for a very long time, doesn't seem to mind in the same way. So I don't know. I mean, if he can pull this one off, certainly he will deserve a Nobel Prize next year. But it'd be great if he put pressure on Putin and also gave Ukraine additional financial support, military support, what they need to protect themselves, to defend themselves, but also go on the offensive when they're ready.
I'm interested in Russia's positioning on this plan because Vladimir Putin has publicly backed this Gaza ceasefire plan. But do you see that as a mistake on his part because America's attention might now turn to Russia?
Not sure. I think he sees what he's doing is very different to what happened in the Middle East. I mean, you guys know very well. You're closer to the action, but I don't think that Putin would necessarily equate the two. I think he sees Ukraine as part of Russian territory, and so I think he looks at it in a different way. But it's really hard to understand really what is going on in Putin's head at this point. I mean, the Russian economy has suffered. He's had over a million casualties. I mean, most rational people would assume that, he wouldn't continue in this vein, given all that they've been experiencing. But he doesn't seem to, feel that he's ready to stop, which is unfortunate.
These warnings or cautious comments from Trump that he could deliver tomahawks to Kyiv again today, do you see that landing with Vladimir Putin as a real threat, a real warning to the Kremlin?
Well, I mean, it would be nice if Trump actually followed through on one of these promises to Zelensky. He's offered support, military support, several times. He's threatened Russia with all sorts of sanctions and additional, sanctions on secondary sanctions like on China and India. So far, just India has had those sanctions. So it would be good if he followed through on some of those threats to Russia. For whatever reason, no one really understands. He has not been pushing Putin that hard yet.
Well, President Trump also revealed details of his envoy Steve Witkoff's first meeting with Putin today, saying Witkoff had, quote, no idea about Russia and wasn't that interested. So to your point, has Donald Trump and the White House administration too often been blind to the Kremlin's threats since he took office?
That's possibly the case. I don't think they have a lot of experts that go with Witkoff when he goes there, but the same has happened in the Middle East. And sometimes, in a way, when you know so much about a place, you know all the challenges and all the pitfalls and where all the landmines are, you often don't take the bold moves. So, we can give them credit for pushing very hard. You don't necessarily have to be an expert. I don't think Trump either understands a lot of the ins and outs of what's going on in Gaza. Maybe his son-in-law does, and maybe some other people in his cabinet do. But they're not. It's not a foreign policy expert team that he has there. It's a team that's ready to apply pressure in the right motives, in the right situations. But so far, as we were saying, not yet with President Putin, unfortunately.
So Donald Trump's type of diplomacy is bold diplomacy, if we can call it that, could be the right diplomacy for this era.
I think so. I think so in these particular cases because both Putin and Netanyahu are incredibly stubborn. And so Trump pushes even further than they do. I mean, Trump's negotiating style is to push so hard that he ends up in a much better situation than he might have been had he just gone through a normal negotiating process. And that's what he's always done in business. And in these particular cases, with these particular leaders, not just Netanyahu and Putin, but also with the Hamas leaders, it may be the right way to do it. I don't know if it's the right way to do it in every conflict situation. They're all very different, and they all have different historical challenges to them, et cetera. So, I think I suspect in the ones that he's been involved in a more minor way, like Azerbaijan and Armenia, he used a very different approach. I think he just threatened financial sanctions. He's trying different things. Some work better than others. This is so far really his own success. And by the way, they had a success in January, as you know, with the ceasefire, and then that fell apart. So it's still very early days to say this will be successful over the long term.
And that was going to lead me to my next question, because earlier this year you wrote there were two options for Trump's term. Best case scenario, he achieves important foreign policy successes. In worst case, there's no method to his, quote, madness, and he does not seal any deals. Where are we at in your view?
Well, we're nearing the fact that he is achieving a very significant success, and we're hopeful that this will endure. I think everybody wants it to endure, and it would be very amazing if he was able to follow it up in Ukraine. I mean, I'm not always a fan of his, but I would be very, be very happy to give him a lot of credit if he was able to pull off both of those.
Well, I'm curious in what we're seeing this week and what we may see going forward, the future legacy of this US administration and Donald Trump. I mean, could President Trump really end up enhancing America's prestige in a way kind of against all odds and put the likes of China, Russia, also even the Middle East in their place, as he said he would?
Well, so far, he has not been able to do that with China. Don't forget, China is an incredibly strong major economy. It's a very different situation than the other ones. China is able to hold back its critical minerals, which all of our countries need. China has something like 90% of the world's critical minerals that we need, from everything from batteries to fighter jets. And so far, China's been able to push back in a very significant way. The other two cases, yes, but if you look at what's going on within the United States, it's not such a pretty picture right now. I think the tariffs have been damaging on the economy. He's sending National Guard troops into all sorts of cities. He's almost declaring a war on a number of Americans who didn't support him. So, I wouldn't say that he's all around an enormous success, but certainly in foreign policy, the issues that you and I follow quite closely. And in this case, this has just been one of the most longstanding, challenging conflicts, the mother of all conflicts, as people have said. So far, so good.
You mentioned China and went into a bit of detail there on Beijing. How important is Beijing's role in this war in Ukraine? Because we know that there are strong relations there, to say the least, between Beijing and Moscow. Does Donald Trump need to try and put China in its place so that Beijing sort of forces Moscow's hand?
100%. I think that's a very good point. And we all know that probably the only person that Putin would listen to, assuming he may or may not listen to Donald Trump, would be President Xi. China now has is the stronger partner between the two. It used to be the weaker partner. It's now the stronger partner. And certainly think China doesn't mind that Russia's getting overextended and that the West is getting overextended in supporting Ukraine. But President Xi, since day one, could have put a lot more pressure on Putin. And it's still possible that he can now. He may want a bit of this glory that Donald Trump is getting. So it's possible that, Trump and Xi together could put pressure on Putin, and that would make a real significant difference, I think. I think it's a great point.
Briefly, you mentioned the Nobel Peace Prize and you mentioned glory there. Do you think that Donald Trump's wishes to be nominated for that Peace Prize are so far-fetched? Could that be on the cards?
Oh, I think it definitely could be on the cards, just not for this year. And it was smart for them not to offer it to him this year. I think by next year, if we still have peace in Gaza and in Israel, if the peace process is moving along, maybe not all 20 points are being implemented, but certainly we're on the right path. And Gaza is being rebuilt, and it feels more of a safe place. I think he would definitely deserve the Nobel Prize. That's for sure. If you could throw Ukraine into the mix, then I think it would be unanimous decision.
And we're running out of time, but lastly, world leaders have gathered in Egypt for the summit on Gaza's future. Do you think that Ukraine will be somewhat in the back of those leaders' minds?
Oh, for sure, especially the Europeans that are in the room, not necessarily the Gulf or Arab leaders or even President Erdogan of Turkey, although Turkey has called out on Putin to withdraw from Ukraine in the past. So it's possible, yeah, some of these countries could come together and think, okay, we've done something well here. Let's try putting our combined pressure. And it really was a combined pressure of all these leaders, plus Donald Trump, that really made this happen. So why not? They're on a roll.
Karin von Hippel, Distinguished Fellow at the Royal United Services Institute. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
And that's all for World News tonight. Do stay with us here on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Good night.